Hello everyone, welcome back to another talk. I'm using the Infinite Highway on Glitch Hikers because we get some nice music in the background. If you're somebody who likes to have something visual to look at, then we've also got the changing background, so we've got all these nice things that make these talks a little bit better, I think, in terms of quality. But if you prefer the Elden Ring background, just let me know and we'll do a consensus thing there. Let's talk about loneliness. Why loneliness? Well, I recently discovered, much to my surprise and amazement, that a meme that I found a few months ago has become culturally significant enough to be having a song written about it, and for that song to feature in a concert by the person who created the song. So the TLDR of the meme is back when there was a trend going on TikTok to leave their phone in the room with their pet when they left, as if to go to work or whatever. They wanted to record what their pet would do when they left. And this one cat, who I believe is named Rufus, meowed in such a way that it sounded like he was saying, "Sometimes I'm alone, sometimes I'm not. Is anyone there? Hello," or something along those lines. And somebody subtitled it and made it a meme, and it was, cute and cats and everything like that. And then somebody, I don't remember the artist's name because I'm really bad with names. I follow him on TikTok, but I don't remember his name off the top of my head. He makes a song around it. He brings the cat's meows into the song, and he adds keyboard and bass and stuff like that. And he makes a song featuring the meows. Well, I just recently discovered that he had a concert, and that was the definitive song in the concert. And in the comments section of that, because I was stunned, I knew he'd made this song pretty close to soon after he made it, and I thought it was pretty funny. But in the comment section of the concert, people were talking about why the song really became that significant, and a lot of people were saying, oh well, a lot of people really connect to the themes about loneliness and stuff like that. But in theory, the internet is supposed to make that easier, right? But when people talk about loneliness on the internet, and I've mentioned this before, but when people talk about loneliness on the internet, they're not talking about regular old loneliness, right? They're not talking about, regular friends or even, people kicking around. What they're talking about is a loneliness for intimate connections, not sexual connections, because there is a difference. Some people don't understand that difference, but there is one. An internet connection, pretty specifically, is a really close bond with someone. Someone you can tell anything to and they'd be there for you, right? Someone who believes in you immediately. And the internet has made that much harder to accomplish for a lot of people, for a number of reasons. Alright? But one of the foundational issues here, despite all its pros and cons, all the pros and cons of the internet's existence, one of the serious problems is escapism. The internet has made escaping from problems incredibly easy. If you have a problem, you can get away from it on the internet, temporarily, right? It's like a drug, or alcohol, for a lot of people. And because a lot of people just somehow assume that children don't have stress or things that they want to get away from, rather than treating that realistically and seriously, it's passed off, it's thrown over, it's discounted, right? Oh, you're a kid, what could you be stressed about, right? I heard this a lot when I was younger from a variety of people. What do you have to stress about? You're a kid, right? And that'll last for, depending on an individual's specific situation, this can even go all the way up to late teens or even adulthood, possibly, until they're 18. Then they're thrown into adulthood without actually having seriously addressed a lot of the problems that they've had. And to escape these problems, since they can't drink and they can't take drugs, hopefully, they go to the internet, right? Let's take some examples. Let's talk about some examples. Now, a lot of people say gaming, and that's perfectly true. It can be. It was mine when I was younger. So fair play on that one. But more significantly, if somebody is feeling particularly lonely or friendless or whatever, they find friends online, which is great. This is a positive of the internet. But if that friendship sours, they ghost. The issues in the relationship, whether it's a friendship or a romantic one, online, the immediate response is to just disappear. Block them on everything, vanish, rather than addressing it, right? Because it's easier. It's easier to ghost. It's, again, escapism. But instead of going from a real life situation to the internet, you're going from one part of the internet to another. Let's say that you went onto some Discord server, great people, make some great friends there, and then one of these friends, I don't know, insults your mother. Not like in a joke way, but they were serious. And you two begin to argue, and rather than hash it out, like maybe a day into this, or maybe even a couple hours, one of you ghosts. Just disappears. Just disconnects from the server, goes to a different server somewhere. Doesn't address the real problem. Right? And that's common. And I used a basic friendship example, but this can happen with any theoretically deeper relationship. You have a long distance significant other. The instant you are upset about something, boom, ghost them. Right? It's easy. It's a piece of cake. And this has become somewhat habitual for a lot of people who, if they start doing it younger, right? Which a lot of them will, because, yes, this is devolving into an argument that it bothers me. It upsets me. So I'll, just leave, right? And as a result, all they do is just bounce from place to place. Every time there's a problem, they just disappear. They ghost everyone involved, and they never form long-term personal relationships. They never form these intimate connections. They never have a real best friend. They never form a deep and close bond with a significant other, long distance or otherwise, because their knee-jerk response to problems is running, right? Now, this is something that has noticeably begun happening as well, very much in real life, where if people are getting upset, rather than talk it out calmly, or at least quasi-calmly, they leave. They quote, get out of the situation. And for some situations, that's the correct choice. If a situation is potentially violent, right? Somebody might, be getting a little more animated than one might be comfortable with. Yeah, that's the appropriate response, is talk away from that, cool off a little bit, and then come back. But if it's just an argument or a disagreement or some kind of problem in the relationship, like, for example, maybe you're dating someone and a friend of yours is, a little too chummy with, your girlfriend, right? So you stop inviting them to things. You stop spending time with them. You just kind of slowly cut them out of your life. Real life ghosting. You might think that example is a little extreme, but we all know at least one person, possibly two, that have done this, right? They've cut themselves off. This is actually, I say one or two people that I've done this, but there's a lot of people who have been pointed out as, when they get into a relationship, they stop hanging out with their old friends. There's a lot of people complaining about this. It's a widespread common reaction, right? Oh, my best friend got a girlfriend, and now we don't hang out anymore. Or, my sibling got a boyfriend, and I don't see them really at all. right? I have a family member who I used to spend a lot of time with who I don't see really that often anymore. I see them once a month. I used to see them every weekend, and now I see them once every month or two, right? He got a girlfriend, right? And part of that is because they, I mean, part of it is the natural desire to spend time with someone you have feelings for. That's natural, obvious, and completely fine. The issue here is that everyone else is being cut off, or the bulk of people are being cut off as a direct result of that, because they don't want a potential issue. They don't want to. Usually, this is like pre-avoidance, right? This is avoiding a hypothetical situation, and the hypothetical situation being, well, I find this person really attractive, so my friends probably will. So in order to prevent me from arguing with my friends over the, us fighting over my girlfriend or my boyfriend or whatever, I'm just going to stop hanging out with them, right? That's very common. You can see a lot of people who mention that they've drifted away from friends because those friends got a relationship. It's very common. You see a lot of people talking about it. And again, that's just premature ghosting, basically. It's just in physical form. And it doesn't address any of the potential problems. Like, sure, possibly, one or two of your friends might find your significant other attractive. Sure, maybe. Absolutely possible. That's why you talk about it. If they're really your friend, they'll respect the relationship, and even if they find them attractive, they won't act on it, right? If a friend of yours acts romantically with your significant other and you're not in an open relationship, that's not a friend. But that aside, you have to be willing to trust other people for that kind of intimate connection. Functionally, the core two issues that are preventing people from forming intimate relationships and not being lonely is a lack of trust and a lack of willingness to confront issues, right? It's and another physical example, another real-life example of this extrapolating out to the real world is safe spaces. Now, safe spaces are theoretically, at least in their intention, are intended for people, minorities, to go where they won't get harassed, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that as a core concept, but society has, let me actually be more specific here, not people, society has, generally speaking, really corrupted what a safe space is supposed to be and redefined it as somewhere one can go to get away from problems, right? One of the things that people do if they're, feeling anxious or worried about something, they avoid it, right? Oh, this is causing me anxiety, let me avoid it. That doesn't fix the anxiety, it doesn't fix anything, right? Psychologists will tell you the best way to deal with anxiety is to take that anxiety and work with it. Confront the source of the anxiety, work through it slowly. Avoiding it doesn't solve the problem. You'll just always get anxious in those situations and you'll never move past it, right? Now, keep in mind, I'm not a psychological professional. This is just from what I've heard from professionals and from what I've read, right? But it's very, very common today for people either with anxiety or people who have self-diagnosed themselves with anxiety will use that as a reason to avoid certain things, certain situations, certain people, right? They will use their anxiety as a shield against problems. They're going to run away from the problem without confronting it, without overcoming it. And all relationships that get really deep are going to have problems. It is the nature of relationships. People have different personalities, people have different perspectives. And in order to form a really deep emotional connection to someone, whether it be a romantic interest, a best friend, whatever, if you want that deep emotional connection, you have to accept there will be problems, there will be disagreements, but you'll never form that connection if you just run from them. If you drop the friend and move on the moment there's an issue. Alright? No, I'm not saying if you discover one of your friends is a serial killer, you should talk through that. That's obviously a problem. I'm talking about non-criminal problems. I'm talking about differences in personality, differences in perspective, differences in maybe even beliefs, right? Or philosophies. These would be presenting potential problems in a relationship, and that's normal. But if you're having a serious disagreement with someone and your reaction is to drop the whole thing and run away, you're never going to, that first off, you've lost that friend. Second off, you're never going to form that deep emotional bond with that friend, right? It's just surface level, and the instant there's an issue, the instant it fails to work the way you want it to, boom, it's gone, right? You just drop it and move on. This is why a lot of online communities are just a bunch of circle jerks, right? People wonder how individuals get just absolutely brainwashed by lunatics online. It's because these lunatics online just go out of their way just to not cause a problem. And that's all a lot of people are looking for. They don't need to run away because everyone's so agreeable, right? Realistically, people disagree. People have problems with each other. And in order to form those deep emotional connections, you need to confront those problems. You need to have a talk with them. You don't have to agree, right? My views on religion are different from my family's, but I can still maintain a fairly good relationship with most of my family. There are a couple of exceptions. There are some that just are not willing to accept a difference in views, a couple of them. But the bulk are. Like, they've accepted that, hey, my views on things are different, and we can disagree, and we can sit down and have perfectly intellectual conversations about these, and not have a problem. I have a pretty good relationship with most of my family members for that reason. But a lot of people aren't willing to do that, right? They're not willing to confront the issues in the relationship and overcome them through conversation and working together, right? Because it's just so easy to... It's easier to discard people, okay? And again, as I've given you numerous examples of, this is translating to real life. People do this in real life. This is not just an online thing, but it's where the habit began forming, right? The only place you really can't get away with this is at work, because you have a job to do and you can't choose your coworkers in most jobs, so you just kind of have to deal, right? But even then, a lot of the times, it's just this veneer of politeness, and then the rest of the time they don't address the issues, they just barely tolerate each other, right? They avoid talking about it. More avoidance. And that's why a lot of people are lonely. A lot of people are lonely because they have a habit of dropping things, particularly relationships, when the going gets rough. When the going gets rough, they take a different path. Right? Think of it this way. Relationships are kind of like taking the other person by the hand and walking down a road with them, and at some points that road gets really rocky. It gets to be an incline. You're basically climbing a small mountain together. And you can either choose to climb that mountain with the other person. Sure, sometimes they're going to drag you down. Sometimes you're going to drag them down, right? But together, you can climb the mountain. Or you can let go of their hand and go around the mountain. Or, off on a totally different trail, avoiding the mountain entirely. But to do that, you have to let go of them. That's how a lot of relationships can be slightly oversimplified. But a lot of people choose to take the path off to the side that leaves the mountain. And they are totally willing to let go of the hand of the person they struck up the friendship with to go and not climb the mountain. Okay? That is what people are doing. That is what a lot of lonely people are doing. And it's not their fault. I want to be very clear. I'm not blaming lonely people for being lonely. This is a habit they've formed because of the internet, because of internet use, the way internet is approached, internet culture, basically, right? And this is, of course, the more tablet babies that are being raised, the more common this is going to be, right? I want to be very clear. I'm not blaming lonely people for this. It's a habit that they've picked up that they don't realize as a habit. It's a reflex. A lot of people don't realize this because they don't think of it that way. They think of it as their choice, but it's not a choice that they're actively making. It's an instinct, a reflex. When the going gets rough, drop them. Right? And this is the core problem of why so many people are lonely in a way that the internet can't solve. Because the internet, in fact, makes it harder to form those intimate attachments. This doesn't even get into the issues of people being liars. This doesn't get into the issue of, people being dishonest or trying to use each other, right? Like a really great example would be crypto bro communities, as they're frequently referred to, right? With their almost cult-like behavior where they wish each other good night and good morning every day, and they have this veneer of we're all in it together, but at the end of the day, the only reason they're all in it is to make money, and the only way they make money is by more people coming in. So, as a result of that, they're all only superficially friends. They're all only friends for their own benefit, the benefit of money. And if you sell your cryptocurrency, you're cast out of the community immediately. Like, immediately. Because you sold, and that decreases the value of everyone else's. And the first person to sell is the first person to lose the least. The people actually heading most of these projects obviously get away with bags, but the person to sell first loses the least. And that creates, again, additional resentment. So that's a really great example of a kind of false friendship where they look, from the outside looking in, they look like they're all on really great terms, they're all really friendly, they're all, oh, we're gonna make it, man. But then the instant the first person sells, it's a cascade, and they all hate each other secretly because they were all only ever in it for the money, and they were trying to use everyone else's mouth to scream from the mountaintops to buy this cryptocurrency, right? And that's a really obvious example that I've given there, but it's by no means the only one. We've got people who form these romantic relationships with people on the internet just to get nudes, or just to jack off to, or whatever, right? They get off to the idea of having the influence and power to get these from other people. There's a lot of people like that out there. And that's, trust breaking. And then you have people who are only friends with you because you're famous online, or because you have money, and they want, they just follow you as a satellite. Things like that. I mean, a really interesting example of this would be Destiny, right? Not all of his satellites are genuinely his friends, right? Some of them are there for the fame. Some of them are there because of some other reason, right? Maybe they just like the money. Maybe he's easy content. Maybe he's a connection to the industry. There's all kinds of reasons why one might be a satellite of Destiny. And I'm not saying all of the people who are satellites of Destiny are like this, but some of them certainly are behind, in their mind. They're not really his friends, they're just using him. Something I'm sure he's aware of. But it's a really strong example, right? And it's difficult to, look at it from Destiny's perspective. When somebody becomes a satellite of his, are they a satellite of his purely on the basis because he's famous? Are they doing it because he's an in? Are they doing it for just content? Or do they actually find his statements interesting? Do they actually want to engage with his conversation? And should they engage in this conversation, there's actually a real possibility of forming that deeper emotional connection, right? Because a lot of people say a lot of things about Destiny, and I'm not personally a fan of his. I don't agree with a lot of what he says. Some of it I do, some of it I don't, which is fine. But what I will credit Destiny for is he is willing to have a conversation with anyone on anything. He is willing to sit down and have that talk, and not a lot of people are willing to do so. You can even see this quite often, the reverse of this really, in manosphere creators, right? A lot of them, when confronted with facts counter to their claims, or they are confronted on the problems of their philosophy, they don't talk it through. They scream, they shout, and they bluster, and ultimately they will either bail on the conversation or they will attempt very hard to drown out the opposing side because they don't want to actually have a conversation about it, right? And that's the real problem here, is that a lot of people do that. I'm using the manosphere because they're a visible example, a very visible example of this, but so few people are willing to sit down and have a conversation with other people and form that deeper emotional connection. I mean, that was the whole point of why I made what wound up being a 4 or 5 part series on incels in the manosphere. That was my way of having a conversation with commenters. Some people were very upset with the way I portrayed that, which was not the intention of... I did not intend to portray it that way. But I sat down and I had that conversation, right? I am totally fine and willing to have these conversations. It's why I don't really get lonely. It's one of the reasons why I don't get lonely, besides naturally being extremely antisocial. But it comes down to being willing to sit down and have conversations about the problems in the relationship. Again, whether this is ideology, belief, this is just a difference in opinion. Maybe your friend has a short temper and it's a problem, and you have two choices. Talk with them about it, or leave them. Just leave them behind. Right? And a lot of people, oh, they've got a short temper? Bye. They don't even say bye, they just ghost them, right? They ghost them like a person, just like with those fake relationships online that I mentioned earlier that are just about, you know, the gratification. Ghost as soon as they get what they want. Boom, done. No problem. This is why I often say that relationships in the modern day are transactional. A lot of people really don't like it when people say that. There are a lot of people who get upset when a person describes relationships as transactional, but frankly, most are these days, right? The transaction usually is, okay, the deal is you offer me this, and I get that. It's not usually outright stated, right? Let's go back to Destiny and satellites for a little bit here. The basis of that relationship at core, the start of it, is, alright, I'm going to satellite Destiny. He gets content out of it, right? He gets somebody willing to engage with him in conversation on opinions and stuff like that. So that's content for him. And I get whatever I'm looking for. If I'm going to be a satellite of Destiny, that could be, again, that could be notoriety, it could be just attention, it could be into the political conversational sphere, it could be maybe, you know, a way to promote my views, right? It really depends on what my goal there is, but it's not something stated. It's not like if I were to become a Destiny satellite, I wouldn't like email him and say like, look, let's make this breakup. No, I would just try to get noticed by him, have a conversation, and then start revolving my content around him for whatever purposes I saw fit, and I would stay revolving around him because he would get good content out of it. That would be the, you know, the bargain there. And the instant I stop being interesting, or I stop being interesting content, I'm gone. Or the instant Destiny no longer fulfills whatever purpose I set out for, he's gone, right? Transactional relationship, and Friendships can be the same way, right? It can just be as simple as wanting somebody just to physically be there, right? Or somebody to have mild conversations with, office talk, so to speak, right? But the instant there's a problem, oh, now you've made the whole thing uncomfortable. Bye. You weren't fulfilling your end of the contract. I just wanted to be somewhere where I could be comfortable, and you were just a part of that. Now you make me uncomfortable because we disagree on something. See you later. Right? And a lot of people do that. In real life and online, it's extreme. It's getting quite extensive. And that's one of the reasons why people are lonely. They're not lonely sexually. They're lonely on an intimacy level. There's no one there for them to talk about their real problems because they never confront the problems with the relationship, so they can't talk about their real life problems. Right? It's just not going to happen. Unless you're able to confront and overcome the problems of a relationship, that relationship will never progress to the point where you can share each other's real problems. And that's functionally, I think, one of the biggest disadvantages of the internet, right? And I think one of the longer term impacts, a lot of people talk about attention span. Attention span has actually nothing to do with it, right? Attention span is just response. Think about it. It's the same idea, actually. We can extrapolate this out to attention span pretty easily. When you get bored of something, you drop it, right? Which is a problem if what you're doing just is not inherently interesting or fun, like your job or homework or schoolwork in general, like you're in class or whatever, and you're supposed to be paying attention. It's boring, so you just wander off mentally, which happens to all of us. It's happened to me. It'll happen to you. It's fine, but the problem is that's being applied to everywhere now, right? And people drop things and move on to the next thing. It's how the fashion industry got so big. It's relying on people's attention spans, just not paying attention enough to styles. They're probably recycling the same 5 styles. Let's be honest. Fashion hasn't changed that much, really. Practical fashion, like regular people fashion, hasn't changed. What famous people and rich people wear is, one, tends to be a bit on the ridiculous side, and two, isn't something normal people would wear, regular people would wear. So, like, whether or not it doesn't matter, but people are like, ooh, that's really cool, and then they move on to the next thing. They've forgotten about it the next day, right? Red carpet fashion is a great example of this, right? It's always changing because it's not about the stars being comfortable, it's about attracting the eye and then being forgotten about so they can reuse the designs a few years later. It's the same thing with regular fashion. But that's why, and people do the same thing with relationships, and that's why they're lonely. There's no one there to have that really deep conversation about, right? I have a couple of friends outside of my family who I can have these really deep conversations with, right? They might not agree with me, but I can have these conversations. We can have these conversations, and at the end of the day, still be good friends. Okay? I have 3 of these people that I'm not related to. 3 friends like this that I can do that with. I can share anything, I can talk about anything, it's not a problem. And if it is a problem, we talk through it. Right? Now, I'm not the best at maintaining contact with my friends. They know this, right? But if they have a problem, they can come to me and talk about it. If I have a problem, I can go to them and talk about it. Even if we haven't talked for months. It's just real emotional friendship. Intimate friendship. And that's what a lot of people can't attain, because the instant there is an issue, boom. The relationship ends. So, if you're lonely, It's important to look internally first. If there's any problem in your life, first look inward. I'll talk about this more with other various problems confronting people, but if you're feeling lonely, like intimately lonely, it might be your habits. It might be your approach, your habitual approach to relationships. It's not something you chose to develop, but it's something you probably have developed by accident. Look at yourself first. And try to be more mindful of how you approach potential relationships, whether they're romantic or they're a friendship or a professional relationship even, right? If I'm having a problem with a coworker, I can talk about it. I've done that before. Whether or not they're willing to talk about it, that's a different conversation, right? Some people just won't meet me halfway. And if you're going to confront a problem in any relationship, it is a two-way street. Both parties have to be interested in participating in overcoming the problem. That mountain I talked about earlier, you can't climb that alone. You need 4 legs, you need 2 hands, and one of you needs to drag the other occasionally. All relationships are a partnership of getting them to work. And again, not everyone's going to, but if you're deeply lonely, if you're lonely at the intimate level, it might be your habits that you've picked up from years on the internet, because the internet is very conducive to that form of escapism. It's very easy. If you're having an issue in real life, you can get away to the internet. If you don't have friends in real life, you can find friends online. If there's a problem in real life, you can fantasize about something else on the internet. It's easy. But not a lot of people talk about it. And as funny as this meme cat song is, and as much as people really relate to it, the people who relate to it and love the song, frankly, are probably not doing anything about it. They're in their feels, which is fine. You gotta get through the feels at some point, healthily. That's healthy to do. But it's not just about the feels. It's about getting up and saying, hey, I tend to drop things the instant they get problematic. I need to stop doing that. And then you go out and you get things done. You change how you approach things. You change how you approach conversations. You change how you approach people. Someone says something problematic. Okay. Or something you disagree with. Okay. Talk. Don't scream, don't shout, don't yell. Talk. If they're unwilling to change their position, okay, is this a really serious problem? For example, I've been talking a lot about overcoming problems, but I want to be clear. There's some things, I used an example earlier of a serial killer, but there are other problems that arise that I could not offer my friendship over, right? I've had friends who I've discovered were racist, and we've had a conversation. I've made the attempt. Sometimes they've been willing to talk about it, sometimes not. Sometimes they've been willing to work on it. I've never seen that be done successfully, and sometimes they're not. But usually these are people I will drop right off the top. And if I don't drop them right off the top, well, by right off the top, I mean after at least one attempted conversation, right? I'll be like, hey, you know, and I'm not talking about jokes or whatever, right? That depends on the context. But if they're like saying something seriously racist, I'll be like, look, your premise is idiotic, first off. And, you know, go through the whole reasons that it's an issue and why that's limiting to not only them, but people around them and everything like that. Maybe I'll have that conversation later on. Maybe I'll make a video about that. But, you know, how they respond will depend on whether or not the relationship can survive it. If they're willing to maybe work on it. You know, some people are raised racist, and they just need some exposure to real life to work on overcoming that. Right? I've met some of these people, and it's beautiful to see. And some people are racist because they stubbornly choose to be. And I can't get along with these people. Right? that's a serious problem that I can't overcome. Like, and if someone busts out like a racist joke, and maybe it's not funny, but I understand it's a joke, I might be like, look, that there's an issue here. Um, while I understand you were joking, the context was off, right? Maybe somebody was talking about their culture and someone dropped a joke in poor taste, right? Now, I'm totally fine for dark humor, and I'm in the right context. I don't have a problem with racist jokes, but with all jokes, it depends on context, right? Context is very important for humor. And sometimes someone drops a joke that doesn't land because of the context. And it happens to all of us. And you got to say, look, that wasn't terribly funny. And you might have upset some people, and maybe you should see more of the context here. And again, depends on how they respond and things like that. But I'm willing to at least make the attempt to have the conversation there, even for something as serious as that, right? Or as unserious as that in the case of racial jokes. But at the end of the day, a lot of people won't even make that effort. So they'll never form that deeper connection, right? Because they never try. But that's what I wanted to talk about today. And with that being said, thank you all very much for listening. If you liked this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please ignore me. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, or requests, please leave them down in the comment section below. And thank you all very much for joining me, and have a great 24 hours.